Ever wondered why Roman gods feel so familiar yet? Hmm. Subtly different from their Greek counterparts?
Yeah, it's like you know the tune, but the beat's completely changed.
Exactly. Like a beloved song remixed by, I don't know, a genius producer, taking on a whole new vibe, a different purpose, but still undeniably powerful. We're talking about a civilization that didn't just borrow melodies, it brilliantly re-engineered an entire pantheon to serve its own unique destiny, as this burgeoning empire. Today, we're taking a deep dive into the fascinating world of ancient Roman mythology. We'll be exploring its unique local origins, its profound transformation through intense interaction with Greek culture, and also why this seemingly ancient system is still incredibly relevant, I think, for understanding the dynamics of power, identity, and societal evolution even now.
And to guide us on this incredible journey, well, we've drawn from an exceptionally rich array of source material. It's quite something. We have historical accounts of Rome's mythical foundation, the
Yeah.
legends. We've got intricate analyses of how Greek gods were actually integrated,
Oh.
and scholarly works detailing the political and social functions of these deities. It wasn't just about belief. Our mission ultimately is to uncover how Roman mythology became this complex, multi-layered religious and cultural system, and specifically how it was designed not just for worship, but to underpin and serve the practical needs of a state striving for dominance and stability.
Hmm.
What's truly fascinating here, and what I think we'll really get into, is how they didn't just copy-paste. They profoundly reshaped these divine beings,
Right.
giving them new functions, new meanings, deeply intertwined with the very fabric of Roman society, rather than just, abstract spiritual significance.
So, the central question guiding our exploration today is how did Rome take something so culturally significant and seemingly ingrained from another civilization, their gods no less, and make it distinctly, powerfully their own? How did they transform a mere collection of myths into an absolutely fundamental pillar of statehood? Okay, let's unpack this
Yeah.
and see what surprises lie beneath the surface.
Rome's own roots, the foundational bedrock of Roman mythology.
Okay, so before we even begin to delve into the extensive and frankly transformative Greek connection, it's absolutely crucial to understand that Roman mythology had its own deep indigenous roots.
That's vital. You can't understand the remix without hearing the original track first, right?
Exactly. Think of it as the foundational operating system upon which all subsequent updates, adaptations, and integrations were meticulously built. This initial, distinctly Roman structure provided the essential framework for everything that followed. It defined the very essence of what it meant to be Roman long before the widespread adoption of Greek deities. It's the bedrock, the very soul of their early identity.
Exactly. The early Roman mythological system, which we can trace from the mythical founding of Rome in, 753 BCE,
Yeah, the traditional date.
right through the early Roman Empire, around 100 CE, wasn't just a random assortment of fanciful stories people told around the campfire. It was a comprehensive and deeply layered religious cultural system. Its formation was meticulous, not accidental at all. It was intricately shaped by the historical development of Roman society itself, its evolving social structure, its constantly shifting political organization, and, crucially, its pressing ideological needs as it grew from, well, a village to a dominant power.
So it served a purpose from the very beginning.
Absolutely. This wasn't merely a collection of tales, it was an integral part of their societal blueprint, meticulously designed to fit their very specific context and serve immensely practical purposes. Initially, this mythology began as a smaller, more localized, and relatively homogeneous structure, drawing directly from the indigenous beliefs of the Italic peoples residing in the Latium region and its surroundings.
So local gods for local people, essentially.
Pretty much. This original form reflected a distinct local identity, deeply tied to the land and the early agricultural communities, long before broader external influences began to take hold. And even in this nascent form, it played a remarkably significant role in solidifying Rome's budding political and cultural superiority, actively defining both Roman religious practices and Rome's very understanding of itself as a dominant and perhaps destined power.
And when we talk about that primordial foundational bedrock, we absolutely have to talk about Romulus and Remus.
Ah, yes. The twins.
This isn't just a quaint origin story you tell kids. It's the very DNA of Roman identity. It explains their core values, their inherent right to rule, and even, the brutal pragmatism that would come to define their empire. It's not just a myth. It's a statement of divine purpose and national character baked in from the start.
You're right, it's foundational. Absolutely foundational. The Romulus and Remus narrative is truly fundamental to understanding Rome. It explains the mystic birth of Rome itself, establishing a sacred origin for the city that set it apart from all others. It bestowed upon Rome a unique sense of divine favor and destiny. But more than that, it clearly articulates the core values that underpinned Roman society from its very inception.
Like what specifically? What values jump out from that story?
Well, things like resilience, determination, the willingness to make incredibly difficult choices for the greater good, and the ultimate supremacy of the community, the state, over the individual, even over family ties.
You mean Romulus killing Remus?
Exactly. That act, however brutal it seems to us, underlines the uncompromising nature of Roman law and the absolute primacy of the state. The city's boundaries, once ritually established, were sacred and inviolable. Remus mocking them was sacrilege. So this narrative firmly established the mythological roots of Roman identity, providing a profound sense of divine purpose and heritage for the burgeoning state. For the Romans, the act of Romulus founding Rome was perceived as far more than mere physical city construction. It was simultaneously the establishment of the foundational religious and political principles of the Roman state.
So building walls was also building ideology.
Precisely. It wasn't just building walls. It was consecrating an entire ideology, a way of life, and a political system, all under divine auspices. And this, raises an important question for you listening right now. How deeply do founding myths, even those rooted in antiquity and perhaps quite violent, continue to influence a nation's identity and perceived destiny even today?
That's a good question. Think about the stories we tell ourselves about our own origins and how they subtly or overtly shape our collective consciousness and national character. It's powerful stuff.
It really is.
That's a powerful point about the enduring influence of these narratives. And it speaks to something deeper than just individual gods in the sky. It highlights the profound importance of pietas.
Ah, pietas, yes.
This isn't just a quaint, abstract concept you read in a textbook. This is a uniquely Roman virtue that profoundly binds the individual, not just to the divine, but to the collective, to the state, to their family, and to their ancestors. It's truly a cornerstone of their social fabric, isn't it? A kind of spiritual and civic duty all rolled into one.
Absolutely. You've nailed it. The crucial social function of Roman gods and religion cannot be overstated. Roman gods were viewed not merely as supernatural beings with their own independent dramas and personal whims, like we often see in Greek mythology.
Right, less soap opera.
Exactly. Instead, they were primarily regarded as sacred powers, or noumena, whose fundamental function was to ensure the stability and order of the state and society. Their very existence was intrinsically linked to civic well-being, to the prosperity and security of Rome itself. This meant Roman religion was inextricably linked to maintaining social order and establishing political legitimacy, often superseding personal belief or individual spirituality. It was fundamentally a public affair.
So your personal feelings about Jupiter were less important than performing the correct public ritual.
Pretty much, yes. Performance and duty trumped personal conviction in the public sphere. The concept of pietas, which you highlighted, is absolutely central to this entire system. This virtue emphasized profound respect and unwavering loyalty, not just towards the gods, but simultaneously towards the state, one's family, and one's ancestors. It was a package deal. This wasn't merely a suggestion. It was considered the absolute cornerstone for ensuring the state's stability and fostering internal peace. It wasn't personal devotion in isolation, but a fundamental civic duty, a responsibility each Roman held to the collective. And to go into this in a bit more depth, the indispensable role of public rituals, sacrifices, prayers, festivals, and official ceremonies must be understood.
These weren't optional extras.
Not at all.
Yeah.
These weren't optional spiritual practices. They were regarded as absolutely vital for Rome's self-preservation, its continued protection, and its ultimate glorification, especially within the critical political and military spheres. They were literally seen as necessary acts to keep the state functioning and prosperous, ensuring divine favor, the pax eorum, the peace of the gods for Rome's endeavors. It was transactional in a way.
Do the right things, keep the gods happy, Rome thrives.
That was the core belief. So consider how this profound emphasis on civic duty and a state-centric religion might starkly differ from more individually focused religious practices we see in other cultures or eras where maybe personal salvation or enlightenment is the primary goal. If we connect this to the bigger picture, it explains why Roman mythology was inherently so malleable and adaptable to political needs. It could be seamlessly woven into the fabric of daily governance because its purpose was largely governance.
And this wasn't just a few big names like Jupiter or Mars doing all the heavy lifting, right? You mentioned it was layered.
Oh, definitely not. It was a complex hierarchical system designed to cater to every facet of Roman life, from the grand affairs of the state down to the uh, everyday concerns of the family farm or the individual soldier.
Like a divine bureaucracy.
That's not a bad way to think about it.
Yeah.
The Roman religious system embraced a vast number of gods and sacred beings, each meticulously designed to appeal to and serve different segments and needs of society. They had distinct categories. For example, you had the great state gods like Jupiter, Juno, Mars, Quirinus, the Capitoline Triad, later Jupiter, Juno, Minerva, whose purview was national identity, governance, military success, ensuring the well-being of the entire republic, or later the empire.
The big bosses.
Right. Then there were family gods, perhaps even more intimate for daily life, like the Lares, who protected the household, and interestingly, crossroads.
Crossroads. Why crossroads?
Well, they represented boundaries, transitions, potential danger, but also community meeting points. So the Lares Compitales were protectors of neighborhoods too. And you had the Penates, who guarded the pantry, the storeroom, and ensured the family's continuity and prosperity, deeply embedded in the patriarchal household structure of Rome.
So gods for inside the house and gods for just outside.
Exactly. And they also venerated numerous nature powers and agricultural deities. People like Ceres for grain, Flora for flowers and springtime, Terminus, the god of boundaries, boundary stones were sacred. They understood their vital connection to the environment, the agricultural cycles, and the very land that sustained Rome.
Makes sense for an initially agrarian society.
Absolutely. And let's not forget the abstract deities, which is quite Roman, personifications like fides, good faith, loyalty, especially in contracts, honus, honor, and virtus, manly courage, virtue, personifications of Roman ideals that provided moral guidance and were sometimes worshipped in temples. Each god possessed specific duties and responsibilities, serving functions that resonated with and supported these different societal layers. This meticulous organization thereby constructed a deeply multi-layered and inherently hierarchical religious system. Every aspect of life, from the emperor's decrees and military campaigns to a farmer's planting and a family's daily meals, had its divine oversight and corresponding ritual. It was comprehensive.
Wow. So it left no aspect of Roman existence untouched by the divine. It really was woven into the fabric of everything.
The Greek infusion, a transformative cultural hybridization.
Okay, now here's where the profound plot twist comes in. Rome, despite having its own robust and, as you've shown, incredibly well-defined mythological foundations, starts looking outwards.
Right, towards Greece.
And what it saw in the Greek world, it didn't just admire. It wanted to integrate, adapt, and make profoundly its own. This wasn't mere cultural mimicry. It feels more like a strategic assimilation. And here's where the story of Roman mythology gets really interesting, transforming from a largely local belief system to something like an imperial tool.
It truly does. The most striking and extensive characteristic of Roman mythology was indeed its profound influence from Greek mythology. This led to the incorporation of a vast number of Greek gods into the Roman pantheon. We see Jupiter becoming Zeus, Juno Hera, Venus Aphrodite, and so on.
But it wasn't just a name change.
Oh, absolutely not. It wasn't a casual borrowing. It was a systematic, deliberate process over centuries. This massive cultural adoption seems to have been driven by a dual impulse. First, there was undoubtedly a profound cultural admiration for the sophisticated Greek world. Rome held Greece in extraordinarily high esteem, recognizing its philosophical depth, its unparalleled artistic achievements, its incredibly rich literary traditions. They saw it as the height of culture.
So keeping up with the Joneses, culturally speaking.
In a way, yes, but also genuine respect. Second, and perhaps equally important, there were strategic political relationships established with Greek city-states and colonies, especially in southern Italy and Sicily. As Rome expanded its dominion, managing these diverse territories and their populations necessitated cultural bridges. Adopting and adapting their deities could be a powerful way to foster unity, establish legitimacy for Roman rule.
And maybe make conquest seem less disruptive.
Exactly. It could preempt resistance by showing respect for local traditions, framing Roman rule as a continuation, not an obliteration. But this, and this is absolutely crucial, was not a superficial or direct transfer of deities. Greek gods were systematically reshaped, transformed, and reinterpreted to align precisely with the structure, core values, and prevailing ideology of Roman society. We sometimes call this process interpretatio Romana, the Roman interpretation. Roman deities and concepts were deliberately identified with their Greek counterparts, but the Roman characteristics were emphasized, amplified, sometimes completely changed.
So they got Roman jobs, essentially.
You could say that. Consequently, these imported deities acquired entirely different functional and symbolic meanings within the Roman context, often far removed from their original Greek narratives and personalities.
So less about simple copying and far more about a profound creative reinterpretation, like you said, a brilliant cultural remix.
Mm-hmm.
The original melody of the Greek gods was retained, yes, but the rhythm, the harmony, the instrumentation, everything was completely reimagined for a new audience and, crucially, a new purpose: the service of the Roman state.
That's an excellent analogy, a truly apt way to describe it. The practical application of this cultural hybridization involved the careful, deliberate integration of Greek mythological figures into the existing, well-established Roman religious framework. And critically, these figures were then reinterpreted to specifically serve the evolving needs of the Roman state and its society. This is a key distinction that really underscores the fundamental philosophical differences between the two cultures. While Greek mythology characteristically emphasized individual, often dramatic and deeply humanized myths, think of Zeus's many affairs, Hera's jealous rages, or the personal heroism and tragedy of Achilles. Very personality-driven. Extremely. Roman mythology, however, saw its gods primarily adopting roles centered on preserving established social order and reinforcing the ideological foundations of the state. They became figures of civic duty, divine sanction for Rome's imperial mission, and exemplars of Roman virtue, or virtus. This fundamental shift in focus is vital, and it raises an important question for you, the listener. What does this tell us about the core philosophical and societal differences between the Greek and Roman worldviews?
Maybe one celebrated individual brilliance, intellectual exploration, artistic expression.
While the other relentlessly prioritized collective discipline, pragmatic governance, the rule of law, and the stability of the republic or empire, the needs of the state often came first. And consider, too, how this inherent adaptability, this remarkable ability to absorb and transform foreign cultural elements, might have significantly contributed to Rome's imperial expansion and its remarkable capacity for long-term governance over incredibly diverse populations. Well, it allowed them to bring newly conquered peoples under a broadly familiar religious umbrella. It made their rules seem less alien, perhaps more a natural continuation, or even an improvement, rather than a complete imposition of foreign gods and ways. It smoothed the process of integration.
Divine makeovers, Jupiter, Venus, and Mars as illustrative case studies.
Okay, to really grasp the depth and significance of this transformation, let's take a closer look at three of the most prominent deities, or rather, their Roman manifestations, who underwent truly significant makeovers: Jupiter, Venus, and let's add Mars in there too.
Excellent choices. They really show the process in action.
As we explore their evolution, consider what stands out to you most vividly about their Roman counterparts compared to their Greek origins.
Yeah.
The differences are often subtle, yet, as we've said, profoundly impactful.
Jupiter, from Zeus's human impulses to Rome's unyielding state guardian.
First up, Jupiter. He's undeniably the Roman equivalent of Zeus, king of the gods, sky god, lightning wielder. But is he truly the same entity?
Well, yes and no.
Right. Yes, in his basic domain as sky god, but profoundly no, it seems, in his character, his personal narrative, and his ultimate purpose within the Roman system. It's like two different adaptations of the same powerful character, one focusing on personality, the other purely on function.
You've hit on the core of it. Jupiter's paramount importance in Roman mythology and his profound transformation from the Greek Zeus are truly fascinating. He was unequivocally the most important Roman god, holding the supreme position in the pantheon, directly corresponding to the Greek Zeus. No question there. However, Jupiter fundamentally differed from Zeus in his core function, his cultural meaning within Roman society, and the specific ritual practices associated with his worship. In Greek mythology, Zeus was indeed the powerful god of the sky, thunder, and justice. But his character was often defined by very personal mythological narratives, distinctly human attributes, and complex relationships.
He got around a bit.
He certainly did. He was frequently depicted as powerful, yes, but also prone to very human flaws and weaknesses. Lust, anger, deception, favoritism. There's a constant stream of personal drama surrounding Zeus. But Jupiter in Rome, in stark contrast, he was elevated to a far more abstract, austere, and frankly disciplined role. He became the supreme guardian of the state, the embodiment of social order, and the divine guarantor of oaths, contracts, and treaties.
Much more serious.
Much more. His supreme authority and immense power were regarded as the very cornerstone and foundation of Roman political authority and the entire legal system. He wasn't just powerful, he was the divine sanction for Roman law, Roman governance, and Rome's manifest destiny. He was famously known by the epithet Optimus Maximus, meaning the best and the greatest.
Not exactly humble.
Not at all. And that title underscored that Jupiter was not merely the king of the gods, the first among equals. He was the ultimate overarching power, divinely governing and protecting the very destiny of Rome. He became an enduring symbol of the state's might and longevity, a literal celestial guardian of the empire.
So, less individual drama, more unwavering doctrine and state-mandated order. It sounds like he traded his tempestuous personal life for a life of pure civic duty and cosmic oversight, a truly uh, corporate deity, if you will.
Precisely. That's a great way to put it. Jupiter's indispensable practical role in Roman governance and statecraft illustrates this perfectly. As the god of the sky, his control over lightning and thunder wasn't just seen as a natural phenomenon. It symbolized divine legitimacy for Rome's most crucial decisions, particularly concerning declarations of war and the signing of peace treaties. It was widely believed that through omens, especially those involving the sky like thunder or the flight of birds' auspices, Jupiter would communicate his will.
So the priests were basically reading Jupiter's mail.
In a manner of speaking, yes. The augurs interpreted these signs. Crucially, the Roman state would not undertake any major decisions, issue declarations of war, or formally sign treaties without first seeking and receiving Jupiter's divine consent, often through these omens or auguries performed by official priests. This made him a direct, active participant in state affairs, not just some distant figure on a cloud.
Right, he had to sign off on things.
He absolutely did. He was the central figure in all official state ceremonies and the most significant religious rituals, reflecting his supreme status and his vital link to the continuity of Rome itself. Take, for example, the Temple of Jupiter Optimus Maximus on the Capitoline Hill. This wasn't just Rome's most sacred structure. It held immense religious and parallel political significance. It was often the site for senators taking oaths, for finalizing treaties, even the endpoint for triumphal parades celebrating military victories.
So the political and the religious were literally housed together.
Inseparably. This demonstrates that Jupiter's function was meticulously adapted to align with and serve the rigid Roman political and legal structure. He effectively served as the divine guarantor of state authority and the stability of the social order. His continuous, diligent worship was considered absolutely essential for the enduring continuity of Roman institutional identity and its overarching sovereignty. Letting his rituals lapse was unthinkable. It courted disaster. Now think about this. How do you suppose this profoundly state-centric view of the divine, where the gods fundamentally served the state and its mission, contributed to the remarkable stability and exceptional longevity of the Roman Empire?
Maybe compared to civilizations where deities might have been viewed as more capricious or solely personal.
Right, perhaps leading to less predictable outcomes, more internal strife based on competing divine favors. Rome's system seemed geared towards unity under Jupiter's authority.
Venus, from personal love to the embodiment of national destiny.
Okay, let's turn to Venus now. On the surface, she's Aphrodite, right? The enchanting goddess of love, beauty, desire. That seems straightforward enough.
It seems straightforward, but like Jupiter, her Roman story takes a much grander, far more profound, and ultimately a strikingly political turn.
How so? She embodies more than just personal affection.
Oh, much more. Venus's multi-layered and expanded role in Roman mythology is another excellent example of this dramatic transformation. She was indeed known as the goddess of love, beauty, and fertility, directly corresponding to the Greek Aphrodite. That was her basic initial role, certainly. However, Venus evolved into a significantly more comprehensive and multi-layered figure within Roman culture than her Greek counterpart. Her meaning expanded dramatically beyond just the individual realm of romance and sensuality. In Greek mythology, Aphrodite was predominantly focused on individual passion, erotic love, and sensual attraction. Her myths typically centered around personal love affairs, physical beauty, sexual allure, often leading to personal dramas and conflicts among the gods and mortals alike. Think of the Trojan War, sparked in part by her promise to Paris.
Very focused on the personal, the emotional.
Exactly. Venus in Rome, though, went far beyond this personal dimension. She gained profound national significance. She was widely accepted as the mythological ancestor of the entire Roman people.
Ancestor. How did that happen?
This wasn't a small tweak. It was a fundamental re-engineering of her purpose, primarily through literature and politics. Virgil's epic national poem, the Aeneid, which became foundational for Roman identity, famously depicts Venus as the divine mother of the Trojan hero Aeneas. Aeneas, according to the legend that Romans embraced, escaped burning Troy, journeyed across the Mediterranean, eventually landed in Italy, and was considered the direct ancestor of the Roman lineage through his son Iulus, who is claimed as the progenitor of the Julius Caesar's family.
Ah, so there's the political connection.
Precisely. This narrative directly linked Venus, the goddess of love and beauty, to the very origins of Rome's identity and its mythical lineage, effectively making her the divine mother of the Roman nation itself.
So she's not just about romantic love, but something akin to dynastic love, a divine patroness of lineage and nationhood, embodying fertility not just of bodies, but of the very Roman state, ensuring its continuity and prosperity.
That's a brilliant way to put it, dynastic love.
Exactly. Her political function grew immensely in importance, particularly during the turbulent, politically charged eras of Julius Caesar and his adopted son, Augustus, where her symbolism was actively leveraged to consolidate power. Julius Caesar, in a brilliant and audacious act of political maneuvering, famously claimed direct descent from Venus through his ancestor, Iulus. He even built the Temple of Venus Genetrix, Venus the Mother, in his forum.
That's quite a claim. It was audacious. This claim provided him with a powerful form of divine legitimacy for his rule, effectively positioning himself as chosen by the gods and aligning his personal ambition and dynastic aspirations with Rome's sacred mythical origins. It served as an incredibly effective tool for political propaganda, allowing him to bypass traditional aristocratic lineage and consolidate unprecedented personal power. Augustus, his adopted son and the first Roman emperor, shrewdly continued this strategic association. He depicted Venus on coins, commissioned art featuring her in the Julian line, further cementing her as a symbol of the imperial family's divine right to rule and the stability of the new Augustan Golden Age, he proclaimed. So she became a tool of imperial branding. Very much so. Venus, therefore, transcended her original role as simply a goddess of love and beauty to become a sacred figure absolutely vital for the state's fertility, both literal and metaphorical. Its prosperity, its military success has protected her descendants, and its continued existence. Her cult was actively enriched by numerous religious and cultural practices designed to appeal to and resonate with various layers of Roman society, from the highest echelons of power to the common people, all united under her symbolic patronage as Venus Victrix, victorious, or Venus Felix, fortunate. Now consider this. How effective do you think such mythological claims and divine associations were in solidifying political power and maintaining social order in ancient Rome, especially in an era without mass media as we know it?
Pretty effective, I'd imagine. If the leader says he's descended from a goddess and builds temples to prove it, it's hard to argue.
It certainly adds a layer of authority. And could similar, albeit perhaps secular, narrative stories of national heroism, shared destiny, collective progress serve a comparable function in shaping collective identity and legitimizing power today? Are we still using foundational stories in the same way?
That's a deep question. Maybe the gods have changed, but the need for the story hasn't.
Mars, from god of savage war to father of Rome.
Okay, that's a profound shift for Venus. Now, let's pivot to another significant transformation, Mars. In Greek mythology, he's Ares, right? Often depicted as a brutal, bloodthirsty, kind of impulsive god of war, frequently disliked even by other deities.
Yeah, Ares wasn't exactly the most popular guy on Olympus. He represented the chaotic, often frenzied, destructive side of war.
But Rome's Mars takes on a profoundly different, almost revered character. He seems essential to their very identity in a way Ares wasn't for the Greeks.
Indeed, Mars's transformation is arguably one of the most revealing. While corresponding to the Greek Ares, his significance and role in Roman mythology were far more noble, foundational, and frankly, positive. Ares, the Greek god, as you said, was often seen as chaotic, representing the savage, indiscriminate brutality of battle. Often impulsive, not particularly strategic. He was respected for his raw power, sure, but also viewed with disdain by the other Olympian gods for his volatile nature and bloodlust. However, Mars in Rome became something much grander, far more respected, and absolutely integral to the state. He was venerated not just as a god of war, but crucially as a father figure to the Roman people. He was often considered second only to Jupiter in importance, and in some very early cults, perhaps even Jupiter's equal or predecessor, as the prime protector.
A father figure, so not just a god of destruction, but a god of righteous warfare and even creation, in a sense. That's a huge shift from Ares.
Absolutely. Mars was woven into the very foundational narrative of Rome. He was considered the divine father of Romulus and Remus through his forceful union with Rhea Silvia, a Vestal virgin.
Right, the origin story again.
Exactly. This immediately made him an ancestor god, giving the Roman people a divine lineage directly tied to a powerful protective deity. It framed the Romans as the literal sons of Mars. This connection meant that Roman warfare, conducted under Mars's patronage, was not merely savage or for plunder, though could certainly be brutal. It was often perceived, or at least presented, as a sacred duty, a means to defend Rome, uphold treaties, avenge wrongs, and expand the divinely sanctioned Roman order. His common epithet, Mars Pater, Father Mars, truly highlights this nurturing, protective aspect, alongside his martial one. He became the guardian of Rome's borders, the guarantor of its military might. And interestingly, he was also a protector of its agricultural prosperity, especially in early Rome. The month of March, Martius, was named for him, a time for both the start of the military campaigning season and agricultural activity. He was linked to the spring, growth, and fertility of the land, a far cry from the purely destructive Ares.
Okay, so he's a god of strategic, disciplined, righteous conquest rather than just chaotic violence. And how did this more foundational, fatherly Mars influence Roman military culture and statecraft?
His influence was pervasive. Roman soldiers before campaigns would offer sacrifices to Mars at his temples or altars, appealing to him for courage, virtus, discipline, and victory. The phrase martial arts still carries his name. His temples were prominent, especially the Temple of Mars, Altar Mars the Avenger, built by Augustus in his forum to commemorate the defeat of Caesar's assassins. This symbolized imperial vengeance and the restoration of Roman order through righteous force.
So linking justice and warfare through Mars.
Precisely. Commanders would dedicate captured spoils and their victories to him. The Campus Martius, the Field of Mars, just outside the sacred boundary of Rome proper, was the traditional gathering place where legions mustered before battle and where citizens practiced military drills. This deep connection transformed him into a deity whose worship underscored the disciplined, organized, and ultimately purposeful nature of Roman military endeavors. He embodied the Roman ideal of virtus, not just individual bravery, but civic virtue displayed through martial prowess in service of the state. If we connect this to the bigger picture, this reimagined Mars contributed significantly to the Roman military's incredible morale, discipline, and effectiveness. It gave their expansionism a sense of divine righteousness and a powerful ancestral mandate.
It turned brutal conquest into something that felt like, well, a divinely sanctioned act of nation building.
In many ways, yes. That was certainly the ideology projected.
The strategic adaptation beyond mere religion towards empire building.
What's so fascinating here, looking at Jupiter, Venus, Mars, is that Rome's extensive embrace and adaptation of Greek mythology wasn't just a simple religious syncretism or, a casual cultural trend of admiration.
No, it was much more calculated.
Exactly. It feels like it was, at its core, a deeply calculated and brilliant political strategy, instrumental in building and maintaining their vast empire. They saw the profound utility in it, far beyond just spiritual belief.
You've truly hit on the crux of the matter there. This entire process was far more than a mere religious internalization or a passive absorption of foreign ideas. It played an absolutely critical role in the continuous reconstruction and reaffirmation of Roman cultural identity, and crucially, the bolstering of its formidable political power. Rome expertly utilized the reinterpretation of Greek mythology to solidify the ideological foundations of its rapidly expanding empire. This enabled them to manage and regulate complex relationships with the myriad different cultures absorbed into their vast territories.
How did it help manage conquered peoples?
By providing a unifying narrative, or at least a familiar framework. When a conquered Greek city saw Jupiter, they recognized Zeus, but they also understood this was now Rome's Zeus, the supreme guarantor of the Roman state and Roman order. It offered a degree of cultural continuity that could ease integration and potentially reduce resistance, compared to imposing completely alien gods.
So it's like saying, our head god is basically your head god, just better managed.
Crudely put, perhaps, but there's an element of truth there. It framed Roman dominance within a recognizable cosmology.
So how did they manage to change the very essence of these borrowed gods, making them fit this distinctly Roman mold? It really sounds like a sophisticated form of cultural engineering, almost like they were editing the divine source code to serve a completely different operating system.
That's a very apt way to put it, a remarkably astute observation. The fundamental shift in divine character and purpose was quite profound, a deliberate exercise in cultural realignment. The often individualistic, dramatic, and visibly humanized characteristics frequently seen in Greek mythological figures were systematically transformed, or at least downplayed, in Rome. They became more public, more functional, and ultimately more disciplined figures.
Disciplined gods for disciplined state.
Precisely. They were serving the efficient machinery of the state and society rather than pursuing their own whims or engaging in personal struggles that might destabilize the cosmic order reflected on Earth. To analyze this in depth, The typically human-like nature and personal narratives of Greek gods, their jealousies, their infidelities, their petty squabbles, their deeply personal interventions in human affairs became significantly more distant, disciplined, and rigidly state-focused in their Roman adaptation. They were less prone to personal weaknesses or impulses and more emphatically aligned with cosmic order, civic duty, pietas again, and the overall welfare of the Roman Republic and later, the Empire. This disciplined transformation made them ideal patrons for a disciplined and ordered society like Rome. It effectively depersonalized them to a degree, making them more like reliable instruments of state power rather than unpredictable personality-driven forces.
And this transformative influence wasn't confined solely to religion, was it? You touched on this earlier. It seems like it spread throughout their entire cultural landscape, affecting everything from their poetry to their sculptures to their buildings, truly making Greek culture their own in a unique Roman way.
No, it wasn't confined at all. It was a comprehensive cultural absorption, a real phenomenon of Hellenization, but always with a Roman filter. Rome's intense interest in and appropriation of Greek culture extended prominently and visibly into intellectual and artistic realms. A strong and undeniable Greek influence is abundantly evident across various facets of Roman culture. For instance, in its literature, Roman authors like Virgil, Horace, Ovid consciously emulated and adapted Greek forms, epic, lyric, drama, and themes, but infused them with Roman ideals, Roman history, Roman political concerns. Virgil's Aeneid is the prime example, Homeric in structure, but profoundly Roman in its nationalistic purpose and its focus on pietas and duty.
So Greek style, Roman substance.
Often, yes. In art, Roman sculpture and painting drew heavily on Greek traditions. They frequently copied famous Greek masterpieces. Many Greek originals are lost, and we only know them through Roman copies. But the Romans also infused their art with a distinctive sense of realism, especially in portraiture, and use it pragmatically to commemorate military victories, honor political figures, or decorate homes. And in architectural styles, Roman temples and public buildings often borrowed Greek orders. Doric, Ionic, Corinthian columns are everywhere. But they innovated massively with materials like concrete and techniques like the arch and the dome, allowing them to create structures of unprecedented scale and practical utility, like aqueducts and bath complexes, that were distinctly Roman in function and ambition.
More practical, perhaps.
Arguably more focused on engineering and large-scale public works, yes. So mythology, while deeply significant and perhaps the most visible area of this cultural interplay, was simply the most widely recognized and strategically potent area of this expensive cultural interaction. This integration of Greek myths into Roman culture functioned not merely as a religious development, but as a sophisticated, multifaceted strategy. It encompassed religious, political, and social dimensions, all designed, consciously or unconsciously, to serve the strategic aims of the burgeoning empire, providing both a shared cultural bedrock and a powerful tool for governance and unification across diverse lands. Outro. So, if we try and connect all these threads, pull it all together for the bigger picture, ancient Roman mythology really stands as one of the most complex, adaptable, and profoundly functional religious systems of classical antiquity. It dynamically shaped the entirety of Rome's historical trajectory, its cultural identity, and its political structure. It served as an indispensable pillar supporting the state's ideological and religious foundations, ensuring its cohesion and perceived divine favor throughout centuries of expansion, turmoil, and eventual stability. It was serious business.
So what does this all mean for us today? Well, I think the key takeaway is that Rome didn't just borrow. It masterfully transformed. It brilliantly synthesized its own deep-seated local beliefs, its own noumena and rituals, with a comprehensively adopted Greek mythology. And in doing so, it created a unique and powerful system that was both familiar in its individual deities, you recognize the names, and yet profoundly uniquely Roman in its overarching purpose and function. It's a real testament to their incredible pragmatic genius and their deep understanding of how powerful a shared narrative can be in holding a society together.
And the detailed case studies we looked at Jupiter, Venus, Mars, they vividly illustrate that this metamorphosis was far more than a simple change of names or slapping a Roman label on a Greek god. It was about fundamentally re-signifying these deities, recoding them, if you like, to meticulously meet the ideological and practical needs of Roman society. And in doing so, they dramatically solidified the sacredness and legitimacy of the Roman state structure itself. This intricate process undeniably made Roman mythology one of the most influential cultural and political elements of the entire ancient world. It shaped how power was perceived, maintained, and propagated for centuries, leaving an indelible mark on Western civilization.
This deep dive unequivocally reveals that Roman mythology was far more than just a collection of fascinating stories or a purely spiritual belief structure. It was an absolutely fundamental cornerstone of Roman society. It truly was the spiritual and ideological architecture of one of history's most impactful and enduring civilizations, a literal blueprint for empire building and the forging of a distinct, powerful national identity.
Which I think leaves us with an important question for you to consider long after our deep dive ends. How do modern societies, perhaps through different mechanisms or maybe more secular narratives, still rely on shared stories, foundational myths, or carefully constructed collective identities? Things like national heroes, historical narratives, core values expressed in constitutions or anthems. How do these things work today to forge national character, legitimize power structures, and help societies navigate their place in the world?
Is the human need for such unifying narratives truly so different today?
Perhaps the methods have changed. The gods might be different concepts now, but maybe the underlying drive for collective meaning and identity remains just as strong. Something to think about.
Definitely something to think about. Thanks for diving deep with us into the incredible metamorphosis of Roman mythology. Until next time, keep exploring.